The storm had already broken every rule in the kingdom before it reached the Alpha King. Thunder rolled across Blackthorn Castle like distant drums as rain slammed against towering stained glass windows. For 3 straight days, the skies had remained dark. Rivers overflowed their banks. Roads disappeared beneath sheets of water. Even the oldest elders admitted they had never seen weather like this before. Yet the storm outside was not what frightened the royal court. Their fear waited inside the highest tower of the castle. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood stood beside a massive stone window overlooking the kingdom. His dark hair was damp from the cold mist drifting through the cracks in the ancient walls. Silver eyes stared into the chaos beyond the mountains, but he barely seemed aware of the view. Something was wrong. Very wrong. For days, Ethan had been trapped in a relentless internal struggle that no healer could explain. The kingdom's greatest physicians had traveled hundreds of miles to help him. Herbalists arrived carrying rare remedies. Elders searched ancient texts for answers. Nothing worked. Every solution failed. Every theory collapsed. The more they tried to help, the more frustrated they became. Tonight, the atmosphere inside the royal tower felt unbearable. Servants moved quietly through the halls. Guards avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be near the king unless absolutely necessary. Ethan had always been respected, powerful, unshakable. Yet now even his closest advisors seemed uncertain. Elder Nathaniel entered the chamber carrying another stack of records. His face revealed exhaustion. He had barely slept during the past week. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "we found another reference in the archives." Ethan did not turn around. Rain continued striking the glass. "And?" Nathaniel hesitated. "It leads nowhere." Silence followed. The old elder watched disappointment settle across the room like another layer of darkness. For the first time in years, the kingdom seemed completely powerless. A sudden burst of thunder shook the tower. Several candles flickered violently. Outside, lightning illuminated the cliffs surrounding Blackthorn Castle. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The strange pressure he had been fighting all week seemed worse tonight. As if something important was just beyond reach. Something he could almost sense but not understand. Hours passed. The storm intensified. Deep into the night, servants replaced burned candles while healers whispered among themselves. Then, without warning, Ethan lifted his head. Every conversation stopped. Nathaniel immediately noticed the change. The king's expression shifted. Not relief. Not recognition. Something closer to surprise. A cold gust of wind slipped through the chamber. It carried the scent of rain, pine trees, and distant forests. Ethan inhaled sharply. For the first time in days, the pressure inside him eased. Only slightly, but enough to matter. Nathaniel stepped forward. "What is it?" The king remained perfectly still. Another gust entered through the window. Again, the same unfamiliar scent drifted through the room. Ethan's silver eyes widened. Somewhere beyond the storm, someone existed who should have been impossible to find. Someone connected to the strange calm settling over him. Nathaniel followed the king's gaze toward the darkness beyond the castle walls. Neither man knew it yet, but far away beneath the same storm, a rejected Omega named Claire Foster was walking alone through the rain, completely unaware that the fate of a king had just begun to change. Several hours earlier, before the storm carried its secrets toward Blackthorn Castle, Claire Foster stood alone in the center of Silver Creek Pack while dozens of eyes watched her in silence. Rain clouds had already begun gathering above the village, casting long shadows across the muddy streets. The annual bonding celebration was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of the year. Lanterns hung from wooden posts. Music drifted through the square. Families gathered beneath decorated tents. Yet for Claire, the evening felt colder than any winter she could remember. At 21 years old, she had spent most of her life trying not to draw attention to herself. She worked hard. She treated others kindly. She never asked for more than she needed. Even so, she never truly belonged. The whispers always followed her. Some claimed she was unlucky. Others said her scent was strange. A few simply believed she was not important enough to matter. Earlier that evening, those whispers had finally become impossible to ignore. The young wolf many expected to choose Claire publicly turned away and selected someone else. The crowd reacted with awkward silence. No one stepped forward. No one defended her. Claire forced herself to smile even as disappointment settled heavily in her chest. She congratulated the couple and quietly walked away before anyone could see the tears forming in her eyes. The celebration continued without her. Music resumed. Laughter returned. Within minutes it felt as though she had never been there at all. Back at the small cottage she shared with her aunt, the atmosphere offered little comfort. Her aunt barely looked up from the kitchen table when Claire entered. "You should rest," she said softly. The words sounded kind yet distant. Claire nodded. She knew what remained unspoken. Everyone expected her to accept her place and move on, but something inside her refused to stay. An hour later, she packed a small travel bag, a spare cloak, a loaf of bread, a water flask. Nothing more. The storm finally arrived as she stepped onto the empty road leading away from the village. Rain fell steadily across the forest path. Thunder echoed through distant hills. Claire pulled her gray cloak tighter around her shoulders and continued walking. Every step carried her farther from the only home she had ever known. Strangely, the farther she traveled, the lighter she felt. The sadness remained, but another feeling slowly replaced it. Freedom. No one was judging her here. No one was whispering behind her back. Only rain, trees, and open wilderness surrounded her. Deep within the forest, Claire eventually found shelter beneath an enormous pine tree. She sat against the trunk and listened to the storm moving through the branches above. Exhaustion settled over her. Yet as she closed her eyes, something unusual happened. A gentle warmth stirred around her. The air seemed to shift. Rain carried a faint fragrance through the darkness. Claire noticed it briefly but paid little attention. She assumed it came from nearby wildflowers soaked by the storm. What she did not realize was that the wind had already begun carrying that scent far beyond the forest. Across rivers, across mountains, across hundreds of miles of wilderness, and somewhere inside a distant castle tower, a king who had been fighting an impossible battle was about to notice it for the very first time. The storm continued through the night, sweeping across forests, rivers, and mountains as though the entire kingdom had fallen beneath its shadow. Beneath the shelter of the towering pine tree, Claire drifted into an uneasy sleep. Rain tapped softly against the branches overhead while distant thunder rolled across the horizon. She dreamed of nothing unusual. No prophecy. No mysterious future. Only endless roads stretching through unfamiliar landscapes. Yet when she woke sometime before dawn, a strange sense of calm lingered around her. For the first time in months, she felt as though the crushing weight she had carried for so long had become slightly lighter. The forest seemed different as well. The air smelled fresh after the storm. Mist drifted between ancient trees. Small birds cautiously emerged from hiding places among the branches. Claire stood and stretched before continuing deeper into the wilderness. She had no destination. She only knew she could not return home. Back inside Blackthorn Castle, the situation had become impossible to ignore. Elder Nathaniel remained awake long after midnight, studying every detail of what had happened in the royal tower. The pattern was undeniable. Each time the wind carried that unfamiliar scent into Ethan's chamber, the king became calmer, more focused, more himself. No healer could explain it. No scholar could identify the source. Yet the effect was real. Nathaniel stood beside a table covered with maps while several advisors watched nervously. "Track the storm," he instructed. One of the royal scouts frowned. "Track the storm?" Nathaniel nodded. "Not the weather. The path it traveled." Confused expressions filled the room, but no one argued. The old elder rarely spoke without reason. Across the castle, Ethan stood alone near the same window where he had spent most of the evening. The pressure he had been struggling against for days had eased slightly. Not enough to disappear. Just enough to make him aware of the difference. He closed his eyes and focused. Somewhere beyond the mountains, beyond the forests, beyond the rain itself, he felt something calling to him. Not a voice. Not a command. More like a distant presence that should have been impossible to notice. Yet every instinct told him it was real. Another gust of wind entered the chamber. Ethan inhaled slowly. The unfamiliar scent returned once more. Rain. Wildflowers. Pine. And something else he could not identify. Something that felt strangely familiar despite never encountering it before. For a brief moment an image flashed through his mind. A young woman standing alone beneath storm clouds. Pale hair moving in the wind. Sadness hidden behind quiet determination. The vision disappeared almost immediately. Ethan opened his eyes. His heartbeat had quickened. "Who are you?" he whispered into the empty room. Hundreds of miles away, Claire suddenly paused beside a narrow forest stream. A breeze moved across the water and brushed against her face. The same unexplained warmth returned. She glanced around, expecting to find someone nearby. The forest remained empty, yet the strange feeling persisted. It felt almost as though another life was moving closer to hers with every passing hour. Neither of them understood what was happening. Neither of them knew why destiny had chosen this moment. But somewhere between the storm and the dawn, the distance separating a forgotten Omega and a troubled king had already begun to disappear. By sunrise, the storm that had dominated the kingdom for days finally began to weaken. Heavy clouds still covered the sky, but the relentless rain had softened into a steady mist. Across Blackthorn Castle, servants and guards noticed something remarkable. For the first time all week, the tension surrounding King Ethan seemed to be fading. He moved through the royal tower with a calmness no one had seen in days. Healers who had spent countless sleepless nights studying his condition exchanged confused glances. None of them understood why the sudden change had happened. Only Elder Nathaniel suspected the truth. The old elder stood in the royal observatory examining maps spread across a circular table. Red markers traced the path of the storm through the kingdom. Reports from scouts had begun arriving throughout the morning. Villages described unusual weather patterns. Travelers spoke of a strange fragrance carried by the wind. Each new detail strengthened Nathaniel's growing theory. Somewhere along the storm's path was the person connected to Ethan's recovery. Meanwhile, far from the capital, Claire followed a narrow trail winding through dense woodland. Sunlight occasionally broke through gaps in the clouds, casting silver beams across the forest floor. Despite everything she had endured, she found herself enjoying the journey. The forest asked nothing from her. It did not judge her. It did not compare her to anyone else. Birds sang overhead. Wildflowers appeared along the edges of the trail. For the first time in years she felt free to simply exist. As the afternoon passed, Claire reached a small abandoned ranger cabin near the edge of a meadow. The structure was old but sturdy. She decided to rest there before continuing her journey the next morning. While gathering firewood nearby, she noticed something strange. Several deer stood at the edge of the clearing watching her. Normally they would have fled immediately. Instead they remained calm and curious. One even stepped closer before quietly returning to the trees. Claire smiled softly. Animals had always behaved differently around her. She never understood why. Back inside Blackthorn Castle, Ethan suddenly stopped during a meeting with his advisors. The sensation returned without warning. The same feeling he had experienced the previous night. The same calm presence hidden somewhere beyond the horizon. His gaze shifted toward an open balcony overlooking the western forests. A gentle breeze drifted into the room. Instantly the unfamiliar scent returned. Rain, pine, wildflowers, and something else. Something that felt like hope itself. Every conversation stopped as Ethan stepped toward the balcony. His silver eyes narrowed slightly. For a brief moment, another image flashed through his mind. This time it was clearer. A blonde young woman standing beside a small cabin near a meadow. The vision disappeared almost immediately. Ethan gripped the stone railing. Nathaniel noticed the reaction at once. "What did you see?" he asked. Ethan remained silent for several seconds. Then he looked toward the endless forest stretching across the kingdom. "She is real," he said quietly. Nathaniel felt a chill run through him. Because at that exact moment, the first scout arrived carrying a report from a remote woodland region. And hidden within that report was a description of a lone Omega traveling through the storm alone. The scout arrived just before sunset, soaked from hours of travel through muddy roads and lingering rain. Every conversation inside the royal council chamber stopped as he entered carrying a leather satchel filled with reports. Elder Nathaniel immediately stepped forward and accepted the documents. The room remained silent while he carefully examined the pages. Most contained ordinary observations from villages affected by the storm. Damaged roads, flooded fields, delayed trade routes. Then he found the report that mattered. Alone Omega. Blonde hair. Gray travel cloak. Seen walking through the western woodland region shortly after the storm began. Nathaniel read the description twice before lifting his eyes toward Ethan. The king was already watching him. Tell me, Ethan said. Nathaniel handed him the report. Ethan scanned the page. The moment he reached the description, the familiar sensation returned. Calm. Certainty. Recognition. He could not explain why. He simply knew the report mattered. Where was she last seen? Ethan asked. Near the old ranger territories west of Hollow Creek, Nathaniel replied. Ethan folded the report carefully. For several moments neither man spoke. Around them, advisors exchanged uncertain glances. Many still struggled to understand why the king had become so focused on finding an unknown Omega. Yet no one could ignore the obvious truth. Since the appearance of the mysterious scent, Ethan's condition had improved dramatically. Whatever connection existed, it was real. Hundreds of miles away, Claire spent the evening beside a small fire inside the abandoned cabin. The storm had finally passed. Through the cracked window she could see stars appearing between drifting clouds. The peaceful quiet felt almost unreal after days of rain and uncertainty. She sat wrapped in her cloak while warming her hands near the flames. For the first time since leaving home, she allowed herself to imagine a future. Perhaps she could settle in a distant village. Perhaps she could build a new life somewhere no one knew her name. The possibility felt comforting. Outside, the forest remained calm. Yet several times throughout the evening, Claire noticed the same strange feeling she had experienced before. It was not fear. It was not danger. It felt more like anticipation, as though the world itself was waiting for something important to happen. Back at Blackthorn Castle, Nathaniel continued reviewing old records long after midnight. Hidden among forgotten reports, he discovered a curious pattern. Several witnesses from different regions had described unusual reactions from animals whenever the mysterious Omega passed through an area. Deer approached without fear. Birds gathered nearby. Even normally cautious creatures seemed drawn toward her presence. Nathaniel frowned thoughtfully. Such stories often appeared in ancient legends connected to rare bloodlines. He turned another page and suddenly froze. An unfamiliar symbol appeared in the margin of an ancient document. The same symbol was attached to a sealed family record filed decades earlier. Nathaniel's heartbeat quickened. He carefully opened the file. Inside was a single name, Claire Foster. The old elder stared at the page in disbelief, because according to the hidden record, the girl the king was searching for had never been an ordinary Omega at all. The discovery kept Elder Nathaniel awake until dawn. The hidden record remained open on the table before him while candlelight flickered across ancient pages. For years, the document had been buried among forgotten archives, sealed beneath layers of royal protection. Now, for the first time, its contents were finally being read. Claire Foster's name appeared repeatedly beside references to an ancient bloodline that most scholars believed had vanished generations ago. According to the records, members of that lineage possessed a rare connection to balance, healing, and destiny itself. Nathaniel carefully turned each fragile page. The deeper he searched, the more astonishing the information became. Claire had never been ordinary. Her existence had been intentionally concealed from powerful families throughout the kingdom. Someone had worked very hard to ensure she grew up unnoticed. Meanwhile, Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the awakening capital. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean beneath golden morning light. For the first time in many days he felt clear-minded. The unexplained pressure that had haunted him seemed weaker now. Yet his thoughts remained fixed on one person, Claire. He had never met her. He had never spoken to her. Still, every instinct told him their paths were moving toward the same destination. Behind him, Nathaniel entered carrying the ancient records. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. Ethan turned immediately. The expression on the elder's face revealed that something important had changed. Nathaniel placed the documents on a nearby table. "The girl we are searching for belongs to a bloodline that was hidden from history." Ethan listened carefully as Nathaniel explained everything he had discovered. The missing records, the sealed files, the forgotten lineage. By the time the explanation ended, silence settled between them. Why would anyone hide her? Ethan finally asked. Nathaniel looked toward the distant mountains. Because some truths are powerful enough to frighten people. Far away, Claire continued her journey through the Western Territories. The abandoned cabin now lay miles behind her. Rolling hills stretched across the horizon while sunlight warmed the landscape. Along the road, she encountered a small farming family struggling to repair a damaged fence after the storm. Without hesitation, she stopped to help. Together they worked throughout the morning. When the repairs were finished, the grateful family offered her food and directions to the nearest town. Claire accepted with a smile. Kindness still felt natural to her, even after everything she had endured. As she prepared to leave, the farmer's young daughter handed her a small wildflower. "For good luck," the girl said. Claire thanked her and tucked the flower into her cloak. The simple gesture warmed her heart. Yet as she resumed walking, a familiar sensation returned. The strange feeling that someone was drawing closer. Back inside Blackthorn Castle, another report arrived from the Western Territories. This one was far more specific than the others. Witnesses had spoken with a blonde Omega traveling alone. They knew her name. They knew the direction she was heading. Ethan read the report once before folding it carefully. Then he looked at Nathaniel. "Prepare the horses," he said. The old elder studied him for a moment. "You intend to join the search yourself?" Ethan nodded. His silver eyes reflected complete certainty. Because somewhere beyond the horizon, the girl hidden from history was moving closer to the truth. And so was he. The royal stables were already alive with activity before sunrise. Horses were saddled. Supplies were packed. Trusted riders prepared for a journey that could take them across half the kingdom. News of Ethan's decision spread quickly through Blackthorn Castle, and not everyone welcomed it. Several noble families immediately demanded an audience with the king. By mid-morning, the council chamber was filled with concerned advisors, influential leaders, and powerful nobles who rarely agreed on anything except one point. They did not want the Alpha King chasing an unknown Omega across the countryside. Ethan listened quietly as one noble after another voiced objections. Some questioned Claire's importance. Others argued that the kingdom needed stability after the recent crisis. A few suggested that powerful alliances could be formed through a more politically advantageous match in the future. When the room finally fell silent, Ethan rose from his chair. The movement alone commanded attention. "You speak as if this is a matter of politics," he said calmly. "It is not." No one interrupted. For days, none of you had answers. None of your plans solved anything. Yet the moment this girl appeared, everything changed. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Deep down they knew he was right. Ethan's condition had improved only after the mysterious connection began. Still, accepting that truth was difficult. Across the kingdom, Claire continued traveling northward. The roads became busier as she approached larger settlements. Travelers shared stories about the Alpha King's recovery. Merchants discussed celebrations in the capital. Every conversation seemed to revolve around the same topic. Claire listened politely but remained detached. The affairs of kings felt very far away from her own life. By late afternoon, she arrived at a lively market town built beside a winding river. Colorful tents lined the streets. Musicians performed near the town square. Children chased one another through crowds of visitors. The cheerful atmosphere lifted her spirits. For a little while, she allowed herself to enjoy the simple happiness surrounding her. While helping an elderly shopkeeper carry supplies, Claire once again noticed people responding warmly to her presence. Complete strangers smiled. Nervous children approached her without hesitation. Even a frightened horse calmed almost immediately when she gently spoke to it. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Yet Claire still saw nothing special when she looked at herself. Back at the castle, Nathaniel uncovered another piece of the mystery. Hidden within the oldest records was a fragment of an ancient prophecy connected to Claire's bloodline. The text described a daughter hidden from history whose arrival would restore balance during a time of uncertainty. More importantly, it spoke of a king whose path would cross hers when the kingdom needed hope most. Nathaniel immediately brought the discovery to Ethan. The king studied the faded words in silence. He was not a man who blindly trusted prophecies, yet every day seemed to confirm that destiny was guiding events beyond anyone's control. As evening settled across the kingdom, Ethan mounted his horse and prepared to leave Blackthorn Castle. The nobles could object. The advisors could worry. None of it mattered. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Claire Foster was moving toward a future she did not yet understand. And for the first time in days, Ethan knew exactly where he needed to go. The journey carried Ethan farther from Blackthorn Castle than any royal duty had in years. Accompanied by Nathaniel and a handful of trusted riders, he followed every report connected to Claire's path. Villagers remembered her kindness. Merchants remembered her smile. Farmers remembered the young Omega who always stopped to help before continuing on her way. With every story, the image of Claire became clearer. Yet the more Ethan learned about her, the more one question troubled him. If she truly belonged to an ancient bloodline tied to prophecy, why had she spent her entire life being overlooked? Back at the castle, scholars continued translating the remaining fragments of the prophecy. What they uncovered changed everything. Nathaniel received the final pages from a messenger and read them beneath the light of a campfire that evening. The ancient text described a daughter hidden from the world, not because she lacked value, but because powerful people feared what her existence represented. The prophecy spoke of balance returning during a season of uncertainty. It spoke of a king guided through darkness toward an unexpected source of hope. Most importantly, it revealed that the meeting between the two was never meant to be prevented. It had been waiting for the right moment to unfold. Nathaniel carried the translated pages to Ethan. The king listened quietly while the elder read every word. The night air was cool. Stars filled the sky above the camp. When Nathaniel finally finished, silence settled between them. "Do you believe it?" Nathaniel asked. Ethan stared into the fire. "I believe that every road I follow leads to her." Meanwhile, Claire arrived in a beautiful valley surrounded by rolling hills and crystal streams. The storm felt like a distant memory now. Wildflowers covered the meadows in shades of blue, white, and gold. Travelers passing through the region often stopped there to rest, and Claire decided to do the same. She spent the afternoon helping a local family prepare for a harvest celebration. The work was simple, but it brought her unexpected happiness. For the first time in years, she felt useful without being judged. As evening approached, music began drifting across the valley. Lanterns glowed beside cottages. Children laughed while families gathered together. Claire watched from a distance, unsure whether she truly belonged among them. Then the farmer's wife invited her to join the celebration. The kindness caught her off guard. She accepted with a grateful smile. Yet even surrounded by warmth and laughter, the strange feeling remained. Something was changing. Somewhere beyond the hills, destiny was moving closer. At nearly the same moment, Ethan and his riders reached a ridge overlooking the valley. Far below, dozens of lanterns shimmered like stars scattered across the earth. A gentle breeze rose from the fields and carried a familiar scent through the night air. Ethan stopped immediately. Every instinct sharpened at once. The calm he had been searching for surrounded him more strongly than ever before. Nathaniel noticed the change. "What is it?" he asked. Ethan looked toward the lights in the valley below. His silver eyes reflected absolute certainty. "She is there," he said quietly. And for the first time since the storm began, the distance between them had become small enough for fate to close the rest. The harvest celebration continued beneath hundreds of glowing lanterns as music drifted across the valley. Families gathered around long wooden tables while laughter filled the cool evening air. Claire stood near the edge of the celebration holding a small cup of warm cider, watching the lights reflect across the nearby stream. For the first time since leaving Silver Creek Pack, she felt something she had almost forgotten: peace. She did not notice the riders arriving at first. Most people were focused on the celebration. Only when conversations began to quiet did Claire glance toward the road leading into the valley. Several travelers on horseback had appeared beneath the lantern light. At their center rode a man whose presence immediately commanded attention. Claire felt her heart skip. Even before she recognized him, something inside her knew exactly who he was. Ethan dismounted slowly. The sounds of the celebration seemed to fade into the background. Villagers stepped aside respectfully as the Alpha King crossed the distance between them. Nathaniel followed several steps behind, watching the moment unfold with quiet understanding. Claire remained frozen in place. She had heard stories about Ethan Blackwood all her life, Yet none of them prepared her for the reality standing before her now. His silver eyes met hers. Neither spoke for several seconds. The strange connection that had followed both of them for days suddenly felt complete. Ethan stopped a few feet away. A gentle breeze moved through the valley, carrying the familiar scent that had guided him across the kingdom. For the first time since the storm began, every trace of unrest disappeared. The calm he had searched for was standing directly in front of him. Claire lowered her gaze briefly. "Your Majesty," she said softly. Ethan smiled. It was not the smile of a king greeting a subject. It was the smile of someone who had finally found what he had been searching for. "Claire Foster," he replied. "I have been looking for you." Confusion and disbelief crossed her face. "For me?" Ethan nodded. Nathaniel stepped forward carrying the translated prophecy. The old elder explained the hidden bloodline, the forgotten records, and the ancient words that had connected their paths long before either of them understood. Claire listened quietly. The story sounded impossible. A few weeks earlier she had believed she was invisible to the world. Now she was hearing that her existence had been protected for generations. When Nathaniel finished, silence settled between them once again. Ethan looked at Claire with complete certainty. "The storm led me to a scent," he said. "But it was your kindness that led me to you." Emotion filled Claire's eyes. No one had ever crossed a kingdom to find her. No one had ever looked at her as though she mattered. Ethan extended his hand. The gesture was simple, respectful, and entirely her choice. After a brief hesitation, Claire placed her hand in his. Around them, smiles spread through the gathered crowd. The villagers sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. Nathaniel looked toward the stars appearing above the valley and quietly smiled. The prophecy had never been about power. It had never been about status. It had been about hope. The rejected Omega who believed she had no place in the world had become the person who changed the fate of a king. And as the lanterns glowed beneath the clear night sky, both of them stepped forward into a future neither would face alone.